The whisper in the dark expanded to approximately 1,200 words. Sarah Chen's footsteps echoed softly through the curved corridors of the Galactic Council space station. The station's artificial day cycle had dimmed to a dusky twilight, leaving the hallways bathed in a soft, bluish glow. As she walked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't paranoia. Not here, where a dozen different species mingled, each with their own agendas and secrets. Her wrist comm vibrated, displaying a message in a script she didn't recognize. The translation matrix struggled for a moment before spitting out a series of coordinates and a cryptic warning. The young ones cry in silence. Help them. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. In her 3 years as a human diplomat on the station, she'd heard whispers, seen shadows that didn't quite fit. But this was the first concrete lead. She altered her course, her heart pounding as she made her way to a little-used storage sector. The coordinates led her to a nondescript panel near the floor. As she knelt to examine it, a faint scratching sound made her freeze. "Hello," she whispered, pressing her ear to the cool metal. "Is someone there?" The scratching stopped, replaced by a terrified whimper that made Sarah's blood run cold. Without hesitation, she pried at the panel's edges, her fingers searching for a hidden latch. With a soft click, it swung open, revealing a small, dark space. 2 enormous, luminous eyes stared back at her from the shadows. The creature huddled inside was barely the size of a human child, its skin a pale, almost translucent blue. It trembled violently, pressing itself against the back of the compartment. "It's okay," Sarah breathed, holding out her hand. "I'm here to help." The alien child, for that's what it clearly was, hesitated for a long moment before inching forward. As it emerged into the dim light, Sarah had to stifle a gasp. The child's body was emaciated, marked with strange, pulsing nodes that looked painfully swollen. A data crystal clattered to the floor as the child crawled out. Sarah scooped it up, slipping it into her pocket just as the wail of an alarm split the air. "Warning. Unauthorized access detected in Sector 7G's security teams en route." Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't leave the child, but escaping with an undocumented alien would be seen as kidnapping at best, an act of war at worst. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from around the corner. "Do you trust me?" she asked the child, who nodded almost imperceptibly. In one fluid motion, Sarah scooped up the alien and sprinted in the opposite direction of the approaching security team. Her diplomatic codes would get her through most doors, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they were revoked. As she ran, Sarah's mind whirled with questions. What species was this child? Why was it hidden? And most pressingly, how was she going to get them both off the station? The corridors blurred as Sarah navigated the labyrinthine structure, the child clinging to her tightly. She could hear shouts and the heavy tread of security forces behind her, growing closer with each passing moment. "Halt, human diplomat. You are in violation of station protocols." The voice boomed from behind, but Sarah didn't slow. She ducked into a maintenance shaft, her muscles straining as she climbed the narrow ladder. The child, sensing the urgency, remained perfectly still and silent. Emerging several levels up, Sarah found herself in the bustling commercial district. Dozens of alien species milled about, engaged in trade and conversation. She tried to blend in, walking briskly, but not running, the child hidden beneath her diplomatic cloak. A group of Xeraxian merchants brushed past, their towering insectoid forms providing momentary cover. Sarah used the opportunity to duck into a side passage, her heart pounding as she saw a security drone zip by. "We're almost there," she whispered to the child, who looked up at her with those haunting, trusting eyes. Sarah's goal was the diplomatic docking bay. If she could reach her personal shuttle, they might have a chance. But as she rounded the final corner, her heart sank. A contingent of station security, led by a stern-looking Volcran official, stood between her and freedom. "Diplomat Chen," the Volcran's voice reverberated through the corridor. "Surrender the contraband, and submit to questioning. Sarah's mind raced. There was no way past them, and every second increased the risk of discovery. Just as despair began to set in, she felt a tug at her sleeve. The child pointed to a nearby ventilation grate, then to itself. With a start, Sarah understood. The alien's small size would allow it to navigate the station's ductwork, a route she couldn't follow. "Are you sure?" she whispered. The child nodded solemnly. With security advancing, Sarah made a show of adjusting her cloak, allowing the child to slip into the vent unseen. She pressed the data crystal into its small hand, along with her personal comm device. "Find help," she murmured. "I'll create a distraction." As the vent slid shut, Sarah straightened, plastering a look of confused innocence on her face. She raised her hands, addressing the security team. "There seems to be some misunderstanding," she said loudly, her voice echoing down the corridor. "I demand to speak with the human ambassador immediately." The Volcran official's face twisted in frustration. "Where is the alien child, Diplomat Chen? Our sensors detected its presence with you." Sarah affected a look of bewilderment. "Alien child? I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps your sensors are malfunctioning." As she engaged in verbal sparring with the official, buying precious time, Sarah's thoughts were with the small, frightened creature making its way through the station's innards. She silently prayed that the child would find safety, that the data crystal would reach the right hands. The security team began a thorough search of the area, growing increasingly frustrated as they found no trace of the alleged contraband. Sarah maintained her innocent facade, inwardly marveling at the child's ability to move so quickly and silently. After what felt like hours of questioning and scanning, the Volcran official was forced to concede that they had no evidence of wrongdoing. Sarah was released with a warning, her diplomatic status grudgingly respected. As she finally boarded her shuttle, Sarah's relief was tempered by worry for the alien child and the weight of the secrets she now carried. The data crystal might hold the key to unraveling this mystery, but she had been forced to entrust it to a frightened, maltreated alien infant. Setting a course for Earth, Sarah Chen knew that her life would never be the same. She had glimpsed something dark at the heart of the Galactic Council, something that went against everything humanity stood for. Whatever the cost, she vowed to uncover the truth and protect the innocent lives caught in the crossfire. As her shuttle broke away from the station, Sarah saw a small flickering light in one of the lower port windows. A signal, perhaps. A tiny hand pressed against the glass. She couldn't be sure, but it filled her with determination. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of humanity's greatest challenge, and perhaps its finest hour. The safe house on the outskirts of New Seattle was a far cry from the gleaming corridors of the Galactic Council station. Sarah Chen paced the worn floorboards, her mind racing as she tried to piece together the fragments of the conspiracy she'd stumbled upon. It had been 3 weeks since her daring escape. 3 weeks of paranoia, of looking over her shoulder, of wondering if today would be the day they found her. But it had also been 3 weeks of feverish work. The alien child, whom Sarah had taken to calling Nova for its luminescent eyes, huddled in a corner, wrapped in a soft blanket. Its condition had improved somewhat with proper nutrition and care, but the pulsing nodes on its skin remained a mystery and a concern. A gentle knock at the door made Sarah tense. She relaxed only slightly when she recognized the rhythmic pattern. 3 quick taps, 2 slow. Dr. Aisha Malik entered, her dark eyes quickly scanning the room before settling on Nova. "Any change?" she asked, already moving to examine the child. Sarah shook her head. "The nodes seem less inflamed, but that's about it. Please tell me you have good news about the data crystal." Aisha's face tightened. "Yes and no. We've managed to decrypt more of it, but—" She trailed off, her gaze distant. "But what?" Sarah pressed. "It's worse than we thought, Sarah. Much worse." Over the next hour, Aisha laid out what her team had discovered. The data crystal contained records of a vast, interstellar network dedicated to the exploitation of children from various species. But it wasn't just trafficking or forced labor. It was something far more insidious. They're using them as test subjects, Aisha explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Bioweapon development, neural interface experiments, even attempts at accelerated evolution. The things they're doing to these kids. She broke off, unable to continue. Sarah felt a cold fury building inside her. And the Galactic Council is behind this. Not all of it, but enough. High-ranking members, influential species, they're all implicated. This goes deep, Sarah. A sharp crack made them both jump. Nova had accidentally shattered a glass, its tiny hands trembling. Sarah moved to comfort the child, her mind whirling with the implications of what she'd learned. "We need to go public with this," she said finally. "The people of Earth, the other species, they need to know." Aisha's expression was grim. "It's not that simple. We don't have proof beyond this data crystal, which could be dismissed as a forgery. And if we move too soon, they'll bury everything. We need more." A notification chimed on Aisha's secure tablet. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "It's Dr. Emerson. He says he's found something big." But she looked up, worry etched on her face. "He thinks he's being followed. He's on his way here now." The next few hours were tense. Sarah and Aisha prepared for Dr. Emerson's arrival, securing the perimeter and readying emergency escape routes. Nova seemed to sense the tension, becoming uncharacteristically agitated. Just after midnight, a vehicle approached. Sarah peered through the blinds, her hand hovering near the stunner she now kept close at all times. She relaxed slightly when she recognized Dr. Emerson's lanky frame emerging from the car. But something was wrong. His movements were erratic, panicked. As he staggered towards the house, Sarah saw a flash of red on his shirt. "He's hurt," she exclaimed, rushing to the door. Dr. Emerson practically fell into the safe house, his breathing ragged. "They found me," he gasped. I don't think I was followed, but..." Aisha was already examining his wound, a nasty energy weapon burn on his side. As she worked to stabilize him, Emerson clutched at Sarah's arm. "The Mars facility," he wheezed. "It's not just aliens. They're taking human children too. I saw them." His eyes rolled back, and he lost consciousness. Aisha worked frantically to save him, but it was too late. Dr. Jonathan Emerson, brilliant xenobiologist and key member of their makeshift team, was gone. Sarah felt numb as she helped Aisha deal with the body. They couldn't risk official channels, not when they didn't know who to trust. As they worked, Sarah's mind kept circling back to Emerson's last words. Human children on Mars. The implications were staggering. Dawn was breaking when they finally finished. Sarah slumped onto the worn couch, exhaustion and grief washing over her. Nova crept close, its small hand resting on her arm in a gesture of comfort. "What do we do now?" Aisha asked, her voice hollow. Sarah was silent for a long moment, staring at the data crystal that had started it all. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We keep going. We owe it to Emerson, to Nova, to all the children out there suffering. We find proof of this Mars facility, and we blow this whole thing wide open." Over the next few days, Sarah and Aisha worked tirelessly, following the breadcrumbs left by Emerson's final discovery. They called in favors, tapped into encrypted channels, and pieced together a horrifying picture. The Mars facility was real, a sprawling underground complex disguised as a mining operation. Officially, it was listed as a joint human-alien scientific endeavor. In reality, it was a nightmare factory where children from Earth and beyond were subjected to unspeakable experiments. As they delved deeper, Sarah began to understand the true scope of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about exploitation or profit. Some factions within the Galactic Council were playing a long game, attempting to engineer the next stage of evolution for their species, and they were willing to sacrifice countless innocent lives to do it. Their investigation didn't go unnoticed. Twice, They had to relocate the safe house as mysterious accidents occurred nearby. Sarah knew they were running out of time. It was Nova who provided the breakthrough they needed. One night, as Sarah pored over schematics of the Mars facility, the child approached, pointing insistently at a seemingly empty section of the map. "What is it, Nova?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowed. The alien child's eyes glowed intensely, and suddenly, Sarah understood. The pulsing nodes, the strange abilities. Nova had been in that facility, and it knew things that weren't on any official blueprint. With Nova's help, they identified critical weaknesses in the facility's security and pinpointed the likely locations of the captive children. It was the edge they desperately needed. But as they finalized their plans, a new complication arose. Sarah's secure channel lit up with an urgent message from an old contact in the diplomatic corps. The Galactic Council was convening an emergency session, ostensibly to discuss recent terrorist actions by human extremists. Sarah's blood ran cold. They were about to be branded as enemies of galactic peace, their evidence dismissed as propaganda. If that happened, any chance of exposing the truth would vanish. "We're out of time," she told Aisha, her voice tight. "We need to move on Mars now, before they can spin this against us." Aisha nodded grimly. "I'll contact our allies in the Mars Colonial Defense Force. If we're going to pull this off, we'll need all the help we can get." As they made their final preparations, Sarah looked at Nova, who watched her with those impossibly old eyes. "We're going to make this right," she promised. "For you and for all the others." The pieces were in place. The next few days would determine not just the fate of countless children, but potentially the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. As Sarah Chen prepared to take the biggest gamble of her life, she knew one thing for certain. The shadows of truth were about to be dragged into the harsh light of day. The Martian dust storm raged outside, providing the perfect cover for Sarah Chen and her team as they approached the hidden facility. Dressed in sealed environmental suits, they looked like any other workers trudging through the rusty haze. But beneath the suits, they were armed and ready for what might be the most important mission in human history. Sarah's voice crackled over the secure comm channel. "Remember, our primary objective is to free the children and gather irrefutable evidence. We go loud only if absolutely necessary." Aisha's voice came back, tense but determined. "The Mars Colonial Defense Force is on standby. They'll move in once we confirm the presence of human children." As they neared the facility's hidden entrance, Sarah felt Nova's presence in her mind. A new and unsettling ability the alien child had developed during their frantic preparations. Through this link, Nova guided them to a concealed access panel. With practiced ease, Aisha bypassed the security systems, and they slipped inside. The stark contrast between the howling storm outside and the sterile silence within was jarring. Sarah's skin crawled as they moved deeper into the complex, following Nova's mental directions. They encountered the first signs of the Atrocities almost immediately. Through observation windows, they saw rows of stasis pods, each containing a small, motionless form, alien and human children, suspended in a dreamless sleep while unspeakable experiments were performed on them. "My God," Aisha whispered, her voice choked with horror and rage. Sarah forced herself to document everything with her suit's built-in cameras. Each image was automatically transmitted to a secure server back on Earth, insurance against the possibility of their capture or worse. As they progressed deeper into the facility, they began to encounter staff, a mix of humans and aliens going about their gruesome work with chilling nonchalance. The team used their cover identities and forged credentials to avoid suspicion, but Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before someone saw through their disguise. That moment came sooner than expected. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a tall, insectoid alien, a Xeraxian supervisor, its compound eyes narrowing as it registered their unfamiliar faces. "Identification," it clicked, mandibles twitching suspiciously. Sarah's mind raced, knowing their forged credentials wouldn't hold up under close scrutiny. Just as she was about to give the signal to abandon stealth, Nova's presence surged in her mind. To her astonishment, Sarah felt words forming in her throat, clicks and whistles in perfect Xeraxian. New transfers, she heard herself say. We were told to report to Section 7 for orientation. The Xeraxian paused, then nodded. Proceed, it said, stepping aside. As soon as they were out of earshot, Aisha turned to Sarah, her eyes wide behind her faceplate. How did you do that? Sarah shook her head, still processing what had happened. It wasn't me. It was Nova. Somehow, it spoke through me. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to dwell on them. They had a mission to complete. Guided by Nova's uncanny knowledge of the facility's layout, they made their way to the central data hub. While Aisha worked to download the facility's records, Sarah and the rest of the team began the painstaking process of disabling the stasis pods and preparing the children for evacuation. It was slow, heart-wrenching work. Many of the children were in critical condition, their small bodies ravaged by the experiments performed on them. Sarah fought back tears as she gently lifted a human girl no older than 6, her skin mottled with strange, bioluminescent patches. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the complex. They had been discovered. Aisha, status. Sarah barked into her comm. Almost there, came the strained reply. 30 more seconds. Sarah made a split-second decision. Team 2, begin evacuation procedures. Team 3, with me. We're going to buy some time. With a handful of their most combat-capable operatives, Sarah headed towards the entrance, ready to hold off the facility's security forces. The sound of booted feet and energy weapons charging echoed down the corridors. As the first wave of security personnel rounded the corner, Sarah felt that strange presence in her mind once more. Acting on instinct, she raised her hand. A pulse of invisible energy rippled outward, sending the attackers flying backward. Sarah stared at her hand in shock, realizing that somehow Nova was channeling its abilities through her. Using this unexpected advantage, Sarah and her team managed to hold the checkpoint, allowing precious minutes for the evacuation to proceed. But they were vastly outnumbered, and Sarah knew they couldn't hold out forever. Just as their position was about to be overrun, a massive explosion rocked the facility. Through the dust and debris, Sarah saw the welcome sight of Mars Colonial Defense Force troops pouring in, their weapons trained on the facility's security forces. This facility is now under MCDF control. A amplified voice boomed. All personnel are ordered to stand down immediately. In the chaos that followed, Sarah and her team regrouped with Aisha and the rescued children. As MCDF medics tended to the young victims, Sarah turned to Aisha. Did you get it? She asked urgently. Aisha nodded, holding up a data drive. Everything. Financial records, research logs, personnel files, the whole damned conspiracy laid bare. Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief before focusing on the next crucial step. Transmit it. All of it. Every news outlet. Every government. Every species in the Galactic Council. They can't cover this up if the whole galaxy knows. As Aisha worked, Sarah knelt beside Nova, who looked exhausted but triumphant. Thank you, she said softly. We couldn't have done this without you. The alien child's eyes glowed with a mix of sadness and hope, and Sarah felt a wave of emotions that weren't her own. Grief for what had been endured, determination to prevent it from happening to others, and a profound connection to humanity that transcended species barriers. Over the next few hours, as the MCDF secured the facility and tended to the rescued children, the galaxy erupted in chaos. The data from the Mars facility spread like wildfire, impossible to contain or dismiss. Reports flooded in from across Earth and its colonies. Mass protests filled the streets. Governments fell. Diplomats were recalled. Humanity's representatives to the Galactic Council publicly denounced the organization and demanded a full investigation. But it wasn't just humans who were outraged. As the true scope of the conspiracy became clear, many alien species found themselves just as horrified. Long-standing alliances fractured as governments distanced themselves from those implicated in the atrocities. Sarah watched the reports with a mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. They had struck a blow against an unimaginable evil, but she knew this was just the beginning. The Galactic Council's power structure was crumbling, and in the vacuum that followed, humanity would need to step up. As the first rays of Martian dawn broke through the subsiding dust storm, Sarah looked out over the facility that had been the site of so much suffering. In the distance, she could see ships landing. Aid workers, journalists, and diplomats from a dozen species, all drawn by the shockwaves of their revelation. Humanity had exposed a great darkness in the galaxy. Now, they would have to light the way forward. Sarah Chen squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The rebellion against injustice had only just begun. The Galactic Council's orbital station loomed before them, a gleaming construct of metal and light that belied the corruption festering within. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiant, the flagship of humanity's hastily assembled fleet. Her eyes were fixed on the massive structure, knowing that somewhere inside were the architects of unspeakable atrocities against children across the galaxy. "All ships report ready, Commander," her XO announced, his voice taut with anticipation. Sarah nodded, her face a mask of determination. "Commence Operation Child's Dawn." Across the fleet, engines flared to life. Smaller, faster ships darted forward, drawing the attention of the station's formidable defenses. Meanwhile, cloaked infiltration vessels slipped through the chaos, making their way to predetermined entry points. On board one of these stealth ships, Aisha Malik checked her gear one last time. "I still think you should have stayed on the Defiant," she muttered to Sarah over their secure comlink. "Not a chance," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "We started this together. We'll finish it together." As their ship docked with the station, alarms blared throughout the structure. The element of surprise was gone, but it hardly mattered. The sheer audacity of a human attack on the Galactic Council's headquarters had thrown the defenders into disarray. Sarah's team moved swiftly through the corridors, their path cleared by Nova's unprecedented abilities. The alien child, now an integral part of the mission, used its psychic powers to confuse and misdirect enemy forces. They encountered their first real resistance outside the main control center. A mixed group of alien security forces opened fire, energy bolts sizzling through the air. "Cover me," Sarah shouted, stepping forward with Nova at her side. Drawing on their shared connection, Sarah felt power surge through her. She raised her hands, and an iridescent barrier sprang into existence, deflecting the incoming fire. Her team used the opportunity to outflank and subdue the defenders. As the last enemy fell, Sarah turned to Nova, concern etched on her face. The alien child looked drained, its luminous skin paling. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Nova nodded, its large eyes conveying determination despite its fatigue. Sarah squeezed its hand gently before turning to the sealed doors of the control center. "Aisha, we need a way in," she called. Dr. Malik was already at work, her fingers flying over a portable hacking device. "These systems are like nothing I've seen before," she muttered. "It's going to take time." Time they didn't have. Sarah could hear the sounds of approaching reinforcements echoing down the corridor. Suddenly, Nova stepped forward, placing its small hand on the door. Its eyes glowed with an intense inner light, and to everyone's astonishment, the massive doors began to slide open. "I don't think I'll ever get used to that," Aisha said, shaking her head in wonder. The team rushed inside, securing the control center with practiced efficiency. Sarah made her way to the central console, her heart pounding. This was it, the culmination of months of planning and sacrifice. As she began to access the station's systems, a familiar voice rang out, stopping her cold. "I must admit, I'm impressed, Diplomat Chen. Or should I say, Commander Chen now." Sarah turned slowly, coming face to face with Zorax, the Volcran official she had encountered during her escape from the station months ago. He stood flanked by a group of high-ranking aliens from various species, members of the Council's inner circle. "It's over, Zorax," Sarah said, her voice hard. "We have proof of everything. The experiments, the trafficking, all of it. Stand down, and you'll be granted a fair trial." Zorax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "My dear, you understand so little. What we've done for the greater good of the galaxy. The advancement of our species requires sacrifice. The sacrifice of innocent children." Aisha spat, her voice thick with disgust. "A regrettable necessity," another council member, a tall, ethereal being, intoned. "The power we've unlocked will reshape the very fabric of our civilization." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the true scope of their madness. These weren't just corrupt officials. They were zealots, convinced of their own righteous cause. "Now," Zorax continued, "I'm afraid we can't allow you to interfere further." He raised a strange, organic-looking weapon, its barrel pulsing with sickly green light. Time seemed to slow. Sarah saw Zorax's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the weapon's glow intensify. She knew, with terrible certainty, that whatever it fired would tear through any conventional defense. But before the weapon could discharge, a blur of motion caught Sarah's eye. Nova had darted forward, placing itself between Sarah and the alien council members. The child's eyes blazed with an otherworldly light, and a wave of pure psychic force erupted outward. Zorax and his compatriots were thrown backward, their weapons torn from their grasp. The organic gun shattered, its pieces dissolving into noxious vapor. In the stunned silence that followed, Nova turned to Sarah, its eyes conveying a lifetime of emotions in a single glance. Then, to everyone's shock, it spoke aloud for the first time, its voice a melody of harmonics and subharmonics. "The children of 1,000 worlds thank you. Sarah Chen of Earth, you have given us hope." With those words, Nova's form began to shimmer and change. It grew taller, its features shifting until a being of pure, radiant energy stood before them. In that moment, Sarah understood. Nova had been more than just a victim. It was a catalyst, a test, set in motion by forces beyond their comprehension. The luminous being that had been Nova raised its hands, and suddenly, the station's systems came alive with new purpose. Across the galaxy, the cruel experiments halted. Stasis pods opened. Imprisoned children awoke. On the main view screen, Sarah watched in awe as ships of unknown design appeared near every world touched by the Council's dark conspiracy. They were rescue ships, she realized, come to collect the liberated children and bring them to safety. Zorax and the other Council members cowered, their arrogance shattered in the face of this higher power. Sarah's team moved to secure them, but their eyes were fixed on the glowing figure at the center of the room. The beam turned to Sarah one last time, its voice resonating with ancient wisdom. "You have proven that humanity's heart is strong, its spirit unbreakable. The galaxy will need that strength in the days to come." With a final, brilliant flash, the entity vanished, leaving behind a profound silence. In the hours that followed, as human forces secured the station and news of the Council's downfall spread across the stars, Sarah found herself at a loss. They had won a great victory, exposed a terrible evil, but the revelations of the day had opened up new mysteries, new horizons. As reports flooded in of children being reunited with their families, of corrupt officials being brought to justice, Sarah gazed out at the star-filled void. Humanity had taken its first real steps onto the galactic stage, fueled by compassion and a thirst for justice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever new wonders or dangers the universe held, Sarah knew one thing for certain: they would face it together, with the spirit that had driven them to right a terrible wrong and protect the most vulnerable among them. The dawn of a new era had broken, not just for humanity, but for all the children of the stars. The Grand Assembly Hall of Earth's newly constructed Interstellar Diplomatic Center buzzed with an energy unlike anything in human history. Representatives from over 100 alien species filled the tiered seating, Their diverse forms a testament to the vastness and variety of life in the galaxy. At the center of it all stood Sarah Chen, her posture straight and her eyes clear as she addressed the assembled delegates. The last year had aged her, lines of stress and determination etched into her face, but there was an undeniable strength in her bearing. "Distinguished representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "we gather here today not just as survivors of a great injustice, but as architects of a new future. The fall of the corrupted Galactic Council has left a void we must now fill with justice, compassion, and unity." As she spoke, holographic displays flickered to life around the hall, showing images of the rescue operations that had followed Operation Child's Dawn. Children of various species being reunited with their families, former victims beginning the long process of healing and recovery. "We have seen the depths of cruelty that can arise when power goes unchecked," Sarah continued. "But we have also witnessed the heights of courage and compassion that can be achieved when we stand together against injustice." In the front row, Aisha Malik nodded solemnly. The doctor had become a symbol of hope for many, her tireless work in treating and rehabilitating the victims earning her respect across species lines. "The entity known to us as Nova showed us that we are capable of more than we ever imagined," Sarah said, a hint of wonder still in her voice as she recalled that transformative moment. "It proved that the boundaries between our species are more fluid than we knew, that we have the potential to understand and connect with each other in profound ways." A murmur ran through the crowd. The revelation of Nova's true nature and the hints of even greater powers at work in the galaxy had shaken many long-held beliefs. "But with this knowledge comes great responsibility," Sarah pressed on. "We stand at a crossroads. We can choose to retreat into fear and isolation, or we can embrace this new era of cooperation and discovery." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. "I propose that we form a new interstellar alliance, not built on dominance or exploitation, but on mutual respect, shared knowledge, and above all, the protection of the innocent and vulnerable throughout our galaxy." The hall erupted in a cacophony of voices, some raised in support, others in skepticism or concern. Sarah remained steady, waiting for the noise to subside. An imposing, crystalline being, the representative of the silicon-based Tholians, rose to speak. "Your words are noble, Commander Chen, but how can we trust that humanity will not simply become the new oppressors? Your species is young, untested on the galactic stage." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the concern. "You're right. We are young, and we have much to learn. But it was that very youth, that unwillingness to accept the status quo, that allowed us to see and fight against the injustice that had become normalized. We don't seek to rule, but to serve as guardians alongside all of you." She gestured to the displays, which now showed images of joint human-alien scientific endeavors, cultural exchanges, and cooperative peacekeeping missions that had sprung up in the wake of the Council's fall. "Already, we have begun to forge new bonds, to learn from each other. Imagine what we could accomplish if we committed to this path fully." A small, avian being fluttered forward, a representative of the Saurlian flock, one of the species most affected by the Council's child experimentation program. "We have seen the heart of humanity," it trilled. "When our children were in danger, yours rose to defend them, at great cost to themselves. The flock stands with Earth." More voices of support began to rise, momentum building. But Sarah knew there were still hurdles to overcome. "There will be challenges," she acknowledged. "Old wounds to heal, new threats to face. But I believe that together, we can build something greater than any single species could achieve alone." As the debate continued, Sarah outlined her vision for the new alliance: a rotating leadership council to prevent the concentration of power, open channels of scientific and cultural exchange, a unified peacekeeping force, and most importantly, ironclad protections for the rights and welfare of children across all species. Hours passed, arguments were made and countered, compromises reached, And finally, as the Earth's sun began to set outside the hall's grand windows, a consensus emerged. The Galactic Guardians Alliance was born. As the assembly adjourned, a palpable sense of hope and purpose filled the air. Delegates mingled, forming connections that would shape the future of 1,000 worlds. Sarah found herself approached by a group of children, human and alien alike. They were survivors of the Council's experiments, now thriving under the care of the rehabilitation programs she had helped establish. A young Arcturian, its tentacles gently waving, spoke in carefully practiced English. "Thank you, Commander Chen. You gave us back our futures." Emotion welled up in Sarah's throat. She knelt down, meeting the child's eyes. "No," she said softly. "You gave us ours. Your strength, your resilience. You showed us what we're fighting for." As the children moved on, Aisha joined Sarah, a datapad in her hand. "Initial reports from the frontier are good," she said. "The Guardians' peacekeeping forces are already making a difference, breaking up remnants of the old trafficking networks." Sarah nodded, a mix of satisfaction and weariness in her eyes. "It's a start. We got a long road ahead of us." They made their way to a quieter corner of the hall, where a window offered a breathtaking view of the Earth below and the star-filled sky beyond. "Do you ever wonder about Nova?" Aisha asked quietly. "Where it came from, what it really was?" Sarah gazed out at the stars, a small smile playing on her lips. "Every day. But I think maybe we weren't meant to understand everything yet. Nova showed us what we could be, gave us a glimpse of the potential within us all. The rest is up to us." As if in response to her words, a streak of light blazed across the sky, too fast and bright to be a normal meteor. For a moment, Sarah thought she felt a familiar presence, an echo of that profound connection she had shared with Nova. Then it was gone, leaving behind a sense of promise, of adventures yet to come. Sarah straightened her shoulders, turning back to the bustling activity of the assembly hall. There was work to be done, a new galactic order to shape. "Come on," she said to Aisha. "The real journey's just beginning." As they walked back into the heart of the Interstellar Diplomatic Center, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. They had become part of something greater, guardians of a legacy that would span the stars. The dawn of a new age had truly broken, and its light would reach even the farthest corners of the galaxy.